Welcome back. We're gonna watch a Sprouts video about Nietzsche. Nietzsche? Nietzsche? Master and Slave. Probably just about his philosophical views. I watched a few videos, read a few books about the homeboy Nietzsche here. But I don't really know what they're gonna talk about here specifically, so let's just watch it.
What if morality is just a fiction used by the herd of inferior human beings to hold back the few superior men?
What?
In this Sprouts special with Stephen Hicks, we examine Nietzsche's explanation for how ethics develop and the consequences for master types living in a world that's dominated by the morality of a slave.
This guy's a real bro, ain't he? Oh. Is this one of the masters of Stoicism?
Part 3. Master-slave morality and the origin of the bad conscience. Nietzsche argued that there are two explanations for how morality develops. Part of the story is biopsychological, in terms of what morality resonates with what psychological type of person one is. The other part of the story is cultural, because different moral codes develop under different survival circumstances. And so Nietzsche searches history for the survival circumstances that necessitated the development of slave morality.
Isn't that weird? Like, when people talk about morality and one's like good, one's bad or whatever, but you could go somewhere or talk to some place other than the country that you're in, or talk to someone that's not from your country, and what you think is bad, they consider good. I mean, that's kind of like that's pretty, I want to say chaotic, but like it's an unlikely scenario where your version of morality is flipped, as in like what you think is good is what they think is bad, and what they think is good is what you think is bad. Like, it's more than likely it's not going to be that extreme. Like, the whole world seems to have um like a base, like a foundation of what's neutrally good and a foundation of what's neutrally bad, and then there's outliers that um kind of like infects other people with like either their words, their mannerisms, or just how they explain certain things, and then they make them think like, oh, okay, well, if you think about it this way, it's not that bad. I'm mainly talking about like really influential people like Hitler, who convinces his nation that what they're doing is good, or someone like Putin, who's doing something the whole world is thinking outwardly bad, but his nation is thinking it could be worse, or it's not that bad. We're justified in doing the evil that we're doing for the greater good type thing. Like, they somehow convince them what they're doing is not as bad as it is. But like I was saying, there is somewhat of a foundational for everyone in the world of what's socially and culturally accepted as good, and socially culturally accepted as bad, and we're all pretty like even in that. Like, killing people is pretty bad, giving someone that needs help is pretty good, you know what I'm saying? Maybe because of the religions, like the ones that push a certain type of morality out there, and everyone kind of, all religions are somewhat the same, tell the same story, tell you to do the same things of like, be a good person and you can,
In the West,
go to
Nietzsche
heaven.
finds the slave morality's roots in the
version of heaven.
Judeo-Christian tradition, in a decisive set of events that occurred early in Jewish history, the enslavement of the Jews in Egypt. The significant result of the Jews being enslaved for a long time was the development and internalization of a moral code suitable for surviving slavery. Suppose that you are a slave. How do you survive? And if you have children who are born into slavery, What survival strategies will you teach them? In order to survive, a slave must obey the master.
I'm gonna say you probably gotta teach them to like not fucking say no. Be like, if they tell you to do something, you better do that shit.
This does not come naturally. So, the first lesson is, you must stifle your nature. Suppose the master strikes you. The desire for revenge comes naturally, but you have to stifle it. Suppose the master tells you to wait. Being inactive does not come naturally, but you must suppress your desire for activity. Suppose the master tells you to do something you do not want to do. You must override your desire to do what you want and obey. Generalizing, you must train yourself to restrain your natural impulses and to internalize a humble, patient, obedient self. You know you must do this because slaves who do not end up dead. Consequently, Nietzsche
Is it? But people that aren't slaves back in those days, if they equally did something bad, they would themselves become slaves. And not only would they become slaves, but their family would also become slaves. So it wasn't just the slaves having to obey, there was also people that were enforcing the slaves also had to obey someone higher up. So it's kind of a weird situation where the master has a master, and that master has a master until you get to the emperor or whatever, that like the whoever's at the highest. Like, this is in every culture, that someone has to obey someone. So who the fuck really is the master? And now in America, we vote in the president who everyone like listens to. So are the people enslave the master since we're the ones picking the top echelon? Like, what?
asserts slave virtues have survival value. Obedience, humility, forgiveness, and patience are good for slaves. And those are the traits slaves will drill into their children if they want them to survive. Over time, the slave virtues become cultural values. In every generation, many people are sheep-like and do not especially mind being slaves.
Fucking sheeples.
But others resent it, and here the story Nietzsche tells becomes darker. In order to survive, they must direct their natural strength and assertiveness against the expression of their own strength and assertiveness. This naturally leads them to resent the master strongly, but they also start to hate themselves for doing what the master says, and
I'm pretty sure they resent them because they're making them do hard fucking labor, and it's like killing and raping their moms and shit. Like, that's probably why they resent them. But who knows, right? Who knows?
for their own role in suppressing themselves. Psychologically, hating oneself causes unbearable pressure inside because the outward discharge of the instinct gets inhibited and turned backward against man himself. Hostility, cruelty, joy and destruction, all this turned against the possessors of such instincts. That is the origin of the bad conscience. Hatred of the strong, self-hatred, and revenge fantasies to ease the pain become the lived psychological reality of such slaves. Make this psychological reality a matter of months and years, and the results will be ugly and poisonous. More provocatively, Nietzsche argues that such slave individuals who feel the internal war most strongly become the social leaders of the slaves. That is to say, they become their priests. It is because of their impotence that in them hatred grows to monster.
Why they make him like massive? Like, he's a fucking unit. Look at this guy. He's like 3 times the size of these fools.
Monstrous proportions. In their leadership role, it is the priests who most strongly advocate meekness, humility, and obedience, and who condemn the aggressive strength and pride of the masters. The priests are not in a position to use physical power against the masters. Instead, the priests develop and use morality as their weapon of confrontation. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, slave morality becomes part of a revenge strategy. Its point is to enable the weaker to survive in a harsh world, but also to undermine the master type's confidence in themselves and eventually bring down the masters so as to exact a spiritual revenge. So,
That doesn't sound very spiritual. You know, that sounds pretty physically demanding. Like you if you're gonna overthrow them, that's a fucking coup, bro.
strength, aggression, weakness, resentment. Is morality really about us getting along together in the world? Or is it really a tool of power, a survival strategy, and a way for the losers to strike back against the successful? Those are the hard questions Nietzsche makes us live with.
So he's asking if a moral code is just because you're weak. Like you don't need a moral code if you're strong. What? So all right. So he's just breaking down a whole populace, right? Let's say he's talking about the slaves, the literal slaves that were conquered from other states, and then their armies picked them up. Literal slaves who have to develop morality, and everyone else that's not a slave doesn't have morals because they're enslaving people, and developing morals because they're weak and they're not the ones enslaving others. So how would that make sense if there was only two types of people in the world, people with no morals and people with morals, and people with morals are the weak people? How would that make sense for the people that still have to listen to someone higher up than them? Because those people still have the same fear that the enslaved people have, because they know that they can become enslaved. And oh, I just don't agree. It's pretty whack, you know?
What are your thoughts on morality? Do you agree with Nietzsche? For more information,
I guess I would have to like look further of what what is the master's version of morality? Do they just outright not have morals? Is that what he's saying? So would it be better if everyone was a master? But if everyone was a master, then who is is there a need for a slave? Like if everyone was a master like Nietzsche was saying, well, I mean he's not saying that. But I'm saying like in a what if situation, if everyone was a master, would there would be no point in morals? So what would like happen to the world? Would would we not divulge into the most charismatic person leading a group of individuals and enforcing their will of like exactly what people tend to do now? Like what was the purpose of the the thought experiment? Are we trying to imagine a world with only morals, with only slaves? Or are we trying to think of a world with only masters? Is there like a benefit of having only masters? Is there a benefit to having only slaves? Um, is he trying to say morality is bad because it was developed by slaves to cope with what they were dealing with? Or is he saying that morality is a necessity to fight against oppression? Like, it's a lot. And I guess I would have to dive deeper into his work before I can make like an actual like judgment on it. But as of from this, I mean, we literally missed part one and part two, but from just watching part three, um, I would I would not think that morality was invented by oppressed people, because I feel like even if you weren't oppressed, you still have a code of ethics that you lived your life with, even though those ethics might not coincide with someone else's ethics. And if, like, this person, like the slave, is thinking, oh, you're evil because you enslaved me. But then this other person that enslaved them is thinking, I'm good because I'm not having my people in the field, right? Like I'm the good guy because I stopped them before they could invade me and kill everyone that lives here. Like they can't just be a blank slate where they don't think anything is good or bad, right? Like there's that's just impossible, because then that would mean that they would be truly neutral. Like these, so like quote unquote masters would be truly neutral to a point where why would they enslave someone in the first place? Because they would feel no type of way about doing that. Their morals and ethics would just stop them, because they would do everything themselves. Like they would find no need for someone else to help them, if that makes sense. But I mean, it might not. My train of thought could be a little bit scattered, a little bit. It's definitely displaced from not finishing the the other parts of this or watching the parts before this. And yeah, that's just what the my train of thought is right now. Not bad video. Okay, okay video this time. Nice. See you guys later.